Damn it, I didn't even like Tammy. And no one liked Tammy Faye Danker. Even Tammy didn't like Tammy. I once heard Tammy call herself trailer loud, trailer mean, just trailer shit. In my opinion, this was a fairly accurate description. She set a school record for most suspensions, mostly for fighting and a couple of times for being insolent to teachers. She didn't graduate from high school, and I heard she worked the night shift at the cash register at a local gas station. I'd more or less known her since second grade, even though I was a couple years older, and she never had kind words to say to me. Of course, I doubted that she had ever said kind words to anyone in her life, so it's clear there. We were socially at opposite poles. My family is, to put it mildly, very wealthy. Country club members, vacations on the islands, a private fishing lodge on the lake, new expensive sports cars for the 16th birthday, ridiculous trust funds waiting to happen. The only reason I even knew people like Tammy Danker existed was because my great-grandfather, and then my grandfather, made it a requirement to receive anything from the family trust that a standard public school education through high school graduation was required. My father would undoubtedly have continued this tradition if his heart had held out long enough for him to take control of the family trust. In general, I avoided people like Tammy until I got to college and law school. I haven't seen her for probably 6 years, but here we are. My sister's friends rented a pavilion at the park for a baby shower and gender reveal party. Sylvia was more down to earth than the rest of our country club and had more or less real friends, so the park was a good place. Men used to not go to these events, but now it seems they are expected to show up, give a gift, and stay away. Mom would have simply disowned me if I hadn't come to support Sylvia, so I had to go. The giant balloons burst, scattering pink glitter everywhere, announcing that the unborn child was a girl. I watched as Cindy, my older sister, tried to brush pink glitter off her 3-year-old son. He ran under a huge cloud of glitter and then rolled around in it, screaming with laughter. 3-year-olds tend to be pretty sticky at the best of times, and now he looked like a living pink disco ball. I was wondering how long the party would last when I looked up and saw a rack-thin Tammy sitting on a nearby metal bike rack, sipping a huge glass of cherry slush and looking with disdain at the domestic scene. She was dressed as usual, dirty pink rubber flip-flops, denim shorts cut to nothing with white pockets poking out along her slim hips, and a red tube top. The overly bright red lipstick stood out against her pale skin, which matched her long, multicolored fake nails. Her short hair was bleached to the point that it appeared white. She wasn't my type. No bends, almost without breasts, not even enough to be called mosquito bites. Her hair wasn't just bleached, it had been cut haphazardly, apparently by a newbie or perhaps by Tammy herself. She never smiled and, as always, had an angry expression on her face. Tammy Faye Danker had gotten the shitty end of the stick in life, and she knew it. Only when I started to look away did she look at me and our eyes met. She had pale blue eyes. I've never noticed this before. It hit like a freight train. I suddenly wanted her. I wanted a woman more than ever in my life. Don't meet or talk to her. I didn't have a sudden desire to hear her life story or know her hopes and dreams. I just wanted to rip her short shorts off, bend her over the bike rack, and take her right there. Her eyes widened in shock, as if she had seen an incredibly lustful image in my mind. Tammy took a shaky breath and staggered, taking half a step away from the bike rack, keeping her eyes on me, even as the edge of her flip-flop caught on the rack for a moment, causing her to stumble a little. I felt her fear, but there was something else there. She felt it too. I fought it, but took a step towards her, then another hesitant step before I could stop myself. Her chest heaved as she tried to calm her breathing. She looked scared as hell, and the still sane part of my brain doubted that she shouldn't be scared. Shaking slightly, eyes still wide and round, she bit her bottom lip for a second, fighting to keep her breathing steady, then threw her head toward the path leading to the old World War I fountain, almost a quarter of a mile away in Peace Grove. Wooden trestles with a sign, "Closed, do not enter construction zone," blocked the path, but it was Sunday, and there would be no workers there. She looked back before nervously looking at me again, making sure I got the message. She gave me one trembling nod, then disappeared into the trees, heading towards the path to the fountain. I waited for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably less than a minute, then, as casually as possible, I slipped past the barricade. When I was out of sight, I ran, taking off my shirt as I went. She shouldn't have left. It could have been a trap. She could have a boyfriend or brothers or some other accomplice ready to attack me and take my wallet and watch. Heck, my Rolex could make her more money than she's ever seen before, let alone held in her hands. I did not care. If there had been a man or two or five waiting there, I would have beaten them, ripped her clothes off, and fucked her hard. She could have just kept the damn watch. She was waiting for me in the center of the circle of marble walls, right next to the fountain, ran towards me, and threw herself into my arms as soon as I entered the small grassy clearing. Tammy didn't have a single thread of clothing on. When I caught her, she wrapped her legs around my waist and began to kiss me with a desperate need that was as strong as mine. The kisses were insanely intoxicating. Each one left me wanting more. She tasted like cherry slushy and passion. She was amazing. We had sex there. Tammy had almost melted, and I began to think she would fall asleep. Without warning, she pushed me sideways, growling. Then we had sex again. It took forever before we were able to disconnect. We just lay on our sides in the grass, looking into each other's eyes in silence. I was sure that she was as lost in what was happening as I was. When my heart slowed to almost normal, I wanted to say something, but couldn't think of what. I was sure she was thinking the same thing. I sighed, trying to say something, but suddenly a clear male voice was heard, too close. "It's around here somewhere." Tammy rolled over, grabbed her clothes, and disappeared like a shadow, her little bare butt disappearing into the trees. I had just put on my shorts and shirt when a small group of men entered the clearing. The presenter, with a notepad in his hands, stared at me. "What are you doing here?" "Just came to see the memorial fountain. I remember it was beautiful when I was a kid." I casually stayed away from them, knowing that I must smell like sex. I ran my fingers through the warm water of the fountain pool, trying to look thoughtful, but really just washing my hands. He looked at the fountain. "Maybe he'll be like that again. The city council is trying to raise funds." The wind blew enough to carry away the smell of sex. "Did you get federal money? They must have something somewhere. I think the fountain is almost 100 years old." He shrugged and winced. 102. We have a line on something, but it's a ton of legal paperwork. "I've always liked the fountain. Maybe I can help. I can do it for free." He looked at me with interest. "Are you a lawyer?" "Yes, I'm at Handley and Brady. Do you have a business card?" He pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "City Works Department. I'll discuss this with them and call you on Tuesday." I looked for Tammy when I left the park, but I never saw her. I told myself that this was some kind of random coincidence, a strange cosmic convergence at a certain time and place. I immersed myself in my work and concentrated in the evenings on the free work for the fountain grant, trying not to think about it. This didn't help at all. Every night I had incredibly intense dreams full of hot cherry kisses. Nothing helped. I lasted almost 4 months. Broke down, I started looking for information about Tammy Faye Danker. Her life was a real disaster. She couldn't be more cliché. Married to Bobby Lee Kriker for 3 years before an extremely ugly divorce. He sent her to the hospital for 3 weeks. Already on probation on parole after a short sentence for trafficking in controlled substances, he returned to prison for 20 years with no parole for 15 years. Much of this time was due to the large amount of drugs and stolen weapons he was found with when he was arrested for attacking Tammy. He didn't seem to get along with anyone in prison and managed to add another 15 years to his sentence. I vaguely remembered him as a huge, rough, hairy man with a rough face and reddish hair. Tammy spent 4 months in the county jail and a total of nearly 500 hours of community service, mostly cleaning up trash along highways. A few assault charges early on, a few arrests for simple possession of recreational drugs, while she was married to Bobby Kriker, a very funny and reportedly very revealing arrest for public drunkenness shortly after the divorce, but nothing else. Overall, this is exactly the type of woman to stay away from. Any sane person would stay away from her, which meant I was almost certainly crazy. Dead weeds and old trailer park gravel crunched under my feet. Tammy watched me warily from an old folding chair on the aluminum porch of her beat-up, discolored trailer. As I got closer, she finally found her voice. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I have no idea. I asked about you. Cameron James Shipton. You're a bloody lawyer." She spat it out with obvious contempt. Tammy probably had good reasons for not liking lawyers. Court-appointed defense attorneys don't do much to help people like her. This is a kind of conveyor belt of justice. Plea agreements for as many defendants as possible because there are too many other cases on the table. Conveyor justice. Most cases never go to trial. Often the law only vaguely resembles justice if you squint really hard and have a lot of money. Tammy Faye Danker never had 2 pennies to rub together, so she probably didn't think the law was fair. I do corporate law. Not very exciting, but not criminal or family law. "I don't need you." She hissed this with furious indignation. I came closer and examined her. The way she sat hunched in her chair, her arms wrapped protectively around her stomach. "What term are you in?" "I do not need you." Her teeth were clenched. "This isn't just about you." She looked at me angrily, with eyes full of tears. "I'm not the kind of girl who gets some rich guy pregnant just to hook him. Get out." "Fuck. Is the child mine?" I saw how she struggled with herself. She wanted to lie to me, say no, but she couldn't. Unless the Holy Spirit visited me in a dream, then yes. That's pretty unlikely. I've been at odds with him for a long time. But I don't want anything from you. I have nothing, but I still have my pride, like the village girl from the trailer. I'm keeping it. I don't need you. I don't need your money." She kept looking away, brushing away tears. I sat down on the steps at her feet and stretched. "I cannot stop thinking about you." "I doubt." She snorted this with obvious contempt. I touched her leg. She flinched, but did not move away. Crazy attraction or chemistry or whatever it is. It was still there. I felt it like an electric shock. Her leg was shaking. Her blue eyes met mine, and I saw a shiver run through her body. The logical part of my brain was shutting down at an alarming rate, lust rising like a tidal wave. Crap. I'm not sure if I said it, she said it, or both. It didn't matter. She rushed down from the chair and onto my lap, kissing me as if it was her last act on earth. We tried to get inside the trailer, tearing each other's clothes off along the way. I just managed to pull down her little shorts when the door closed behind us. Her t-shirt was already hanging on the aluminum porch railing. Well, then you should guess what we were doing. "You need to leave." Why, I could hear the frogs starting to croak outside, which meant it was getting dark. I had been with her for at least 3 hours now, mostly in an ecstatic haze of lust, heat, and wetness. I had several bite marks, but so does she. Because this is my place, and I said you need to leave. It's the law. There was no energy in her voice. She knew I couldn't just walk away, but she needed to say it. "Are you going to call the police?" She laid her head on my shoulder. "You should have. You broke into my place and did all these terrible things to me." I snorted, running my fingers through her short hair, but didn't respond. "You must leave." I felt her smile at my words. We've gone from should go to should go. Maybe if I wait a little longer, we'll reach never leave. Moreover, she was lying half on top of me, with her leg wrapped around me, and clearly had no intention of letting me go anytime soon. I kissed the top of her head. "It would be for your own good." Her voice was softer with a slight hint of sadness. I simply ran my hand down her spine until it stopped at her small bare ass. She winced as a wave of shivers ran down her spine, then pulled herself closer to my side. "You don't want anything to do with me." I silently considered this for a long moment. She was right, absolutely right. Just not the way she thought. I looked down at her and used my free hand to lift her face so she looked at me. You're right about that. I don't want a part. I want the whole thing. I squeezed her ass. You've already got everything I have that anyone could want. Nevertheless, she continued, you don't need some girl from a trailer. It was time to stop this. I gently squeezed her ass, stopping her. No matter what we do now, no one dares talk about the mother of my child like that, including yourself. She shifted and looked at me almost in fear. Why the hell did this happen? And what the hell are we going to do? Cameron is from the country club and Tammy is from the trailer. This doesn't make any sense. She said, we, so at least she accepted that we were both in this. I hope you'll agree to stay with me for a while so we can figure this out together. What if I want to stay here? Then I'll have to come here every evening. What if I tell you that you can't come here? Then I guess we'll have to have sex on the porch. Is this your plan, to come over and have sex with me every night? I don't know if you can call it a plan. I think it's just what will happen if I come. I don't think I can stay away, and I don't think you want that. I'm sure we have no control over what will happen when we are within each other's reach. I still have to come to discuss matters about the child. Do you have a better offer? She sighed. What size is your bed? King size. That's a lot of bed for one person. It would be much better with two people. We'll probably get the police called if we have sex on my porch all the time. Sooner or later. You're really quite loud. My house is very soundproofed. She sighed heavily. I've never been this loud before. Never. I can't control it with you. It just comes out on its own, and I can't stop it. I kissed the top of her head again. You can be as loud as you want with me. There was a quiet, almost happy sound from her, then a deep sigh. I'm serious. I have nothing. I don't even have a regular job. I lost my job at a gas station because I refused to sleep with the new owner. I deliver food to pay the bills. I'm almost 2 months behind on rent. You better. It's not about an offer or an exchange or anything like that. It's about two people who have something special that they need to understand. You don't need a job, the lights are on in my house, and there's no rent to pay. I'm not a parasite. No, not a parasite. But you're carrying our child, so you can at least relax a little. It would be for the child. Even if we don't end up together, it's the right thing to do. She sighed heavily. I realized that this hooked her. We don't love each other. We don't even know each other. How can we love each other? But we have a place to start. She snorted with pleasure. Have sex like wild animals. Have sex like animals. But this is a start, right? We have to start somewhere. Why not this? She looked up, her blue eyes sparkling with humor, and she half smiled. If we do this, I'm warning you right away, I'm going to take you until you're exhausted. Me too. I even went to clubs a few times to try to forget about you. But none of the women were you, so I went out alone. Do you want to go get something to eat and then go there? She stood up abruptly, crossing her arms over my chest, and looked into my eyes. Swear that you're not a serial killer or anything like that. I'm not a killer, Tammy. I swear, I'm not going to hurt you. She half smiled again. Murderers don't lie, right? She sighed. If you're a murderer, I'm done for. You'll be satisfied, that's for sure, every night. I promise. She smiled ironically. It will probably be necessary every morning, at least for a while, until we remove this edge. We bought burgers and fries from a nearby fast food joint and even managed to eat them before we stress-tested the king-size bed and a comfortable chair. The weekend passed, partly in a haze of passion, partly just desperately holding on to each other. On Monday morning, I gently squeezed her little bare ass and left her sleeping in the bed while I got ready for work. I finished shaving and realized she was standing in the bathroom doorway, watching me. Give me a minute to get dressed so you can drop me off somewhere. Where? I don't know, I just thought you'd be more comfortable if I wasn't home while you worked. Why? Just relax, get some sleep. Maybe there'll be something on TV. I think there's a million channels. Aren't you afraid that I'll steal all your things? You barely know me. Why? If you took something, it would be all you have. Stay here, and it's more or less all yours. It really scared her. She was very quiet that evening and then came and sat opposite me in the living room. Cam, I don't know where this is going. It's too easy, it doesn't happen unless it's illegal or wrong. I was about to answer, but she raised her hand. I just want you to know that I'm not an easy girl or a fortune hunter. Having made my decision, I stood up, walked over, and knelt right in front of her. No, you're not. And since we talk about who you are or who you're not, we always say we don't love each other, but whatever it is that we have, I think it's forever. She nodded, her eyes glassy. I can feel it. It's fucking scary. It's like gravity, constantly pulling us towards each other. So we're stuck with each other. Tammy made an ironic face. Hurry up, you're stuck with me. She sighed. What's even scarier is that I love it, and I don't want it to stop. I grabbed her hands. So let's not. Let's just make it official. Her eyes widened in shock. Now this crazy. It was 3 damn days. If we break up and go our separate ways, will that be fair to anyone we ever meet? I will never stop thinking about you. Shaking her head, she looked down. There is no way we could stay apart. But we were barely together all weekend. It was a great weekend, though. Plus, we're having a baby soon. Are you sure about this? You could just take me as your assistant and marry the right girl. Isn't that what rich people do? I don't know if I'll like it, but I would do it for you. The way she said it, something popped into my head. I could tell she hated the idea, but for my sake, she would put aside her country pride and accept whatever I was willing to give. Fuck this. She deserved better. We deserved better. Perhaps it wasn't love, but damn, it was something worthwhile. Some people do this, but I couldn't do that to you. You're not that girl who gets knocked down by some rich guy so she can get her claws into him, remember? Just so I'm clear, Tammy, is that okay with you? Marry me? She bit her lip and nodded, then whispered, Yeah, Cam, I don't think we have a choice, but I'll sign whatever you want. I don't need your money or anything like that. Only you. I picked her up and just held her for a very long time. The next weekend, Tammy almost had a seizure when I took her to the jewelry store to buy a ring. I already knew what her reaction would be, so I called ahead and asked for a private showing without discussing prices. She didn't like it and continued to try not to look at the ring she really wanted, but she was against my stubbornness and skillful reading of the body language of a very professional saleswoman. She was upset when I said the price, but she would have been even more upset if she had known that I left a couple of zeros at the end. However, the money was well spent. I think I had to go a long way to convince her that I found her valuable. Plus, it was pretty much the only thing she ever wore around the house. Tammy has no close relatives or real friends left. As for my family, I just avoided them, not knowing how to deal with them. Tammy was more or less afraid of meeting them, sure that they would hate her and assume the worst. Luckily, my mom and sisters had a very busy social schedule, so I was able to put everything on hold for a bit. In the blink of an eye, Tammy was 6 months old, cute as a bug with her skinny figure and growing bump, and hornier than ever. Due to hormones and increased blood flow, she was constantly horny. She had a few moments that she called crying, but most of the time she just needed to be scolded. She usually greeted me at the door, wearing nothing but a ring, cherry red lipstick, and a hungry look in her eyes. It wasn't just sex, though. Whatever happened between us, I felt right, healthy and alive. We both knew it wouldn't end. No matter what happens, we're locked together forever, and we need to make sure everyone understands that. So, I finally told my mom about the situation. Well, at least the PG version. Mom was not at all happy with the fact that a pregnant girl, whom she had never even met, was living with me. She was even less excited when she found out we were engaged. I knew that meeting my mother would be unpleasant. I prepared Tammy as best I could. Mom, of course, wanted to meet us at the country club. This was her home ground. She was a constant companion there and was there almost all her life. Since her dad passed away 6 years ago, at times she felt like she was living there. As we entered the country club, Tammy again expressed her concerns. "Will your family even go along with this?" I shrugged. "Probably not, at least not at first." Mom smiled blankly as we approached the table. The whole meeting was apparently something of an ambush. Both my sisters, Cynthia and Sylvia, were there, perfectly plastic smiles on their perfectly made-up faces, but I could see the disbelief and a little bit of contempt. They wore $1,000 dresses, a stark contrast to Tammy's blue cotton maternity dress, the one she had bought at a thrift store. I tried to buy her more things, but she just couldn't bring herself to do it. She didn't want anyone to think that she was with me for the money. "So this is your bride?" Mom interrupted me before I could get Tammy fully seated and introduce her. "Mom, this is Tammy. Tammy, this is my mom and my sisters, Saisha and Sylvia." Tammy tried her best, but the ship sank before we arrived. My sisters remembered her from middle school, and although they weren't aggressive at first, they seemed to try to make it uncomfortable. After intense introductions and even more intense small talk over dinner, Cynthia finally took her throat. "I remember you, Tammy Danker, don't I? I thought you were married." "Yeah." Tammy pursed her lips for a second. "Now I'm divorced. Bobby Lee stalked me, and when I called him out on it, he showed me that he could break anything except wedding vows." "Oh." Mom leaned back sharply and looked at Cynthia. Tammy's face tensed. "He beat me so badly that he thought he killed me. He ran out and left the door open. A curious neighbor saw him running away, came up, called the police on his mobile phone, and called an ambulance for me." "It's horrible." My mother glared at Cynthia. Something was wrong. Sort of. "He will spend the next 30 years or so in prison. He deserves it for doing this to you." Sylvia's face turned pale. All her original behavior disappeared. "I think it was basically 2 pounds of fentanyl and a gun in his car when he was captured, considering he was already out on parole. Nobody was going to send him to jail for that long just because he beat up Try on me." Tammy looked at me warily, and I raised an eyebrow at her. A tiny smile flickered on her lips. "Still, you were married, so you probably still have some feelings for him." Cynthia said this nonchalantly, while Mom and Sylvia stared at her in shock. Tammy laughed cruelly. "I always seeing Bobby Lee Creature again is the only thing I want to feel like I have a baseball bat in my hands. One of them is aluminum, so I can hear it ringing in his head." The conversation died down for a while, but Cynthia seemed determined to make a scene. "So are you sure the baby is Cam's?" Mom turned red with anger, but Tammy just shrugged. "I haven't been with anyone but him for over a year and a half. Bobby pushed me away from men for a while." She suddenly raised her head, and I saw a flash of something hard in her as she looked at Cynthia. "But I will test the baby's DNA to prove it." She nodded her head at me, and her voice dropped to a low hiss. "He said he trusted me, and I didn't have to, but I didn't want anyone to doubt that." There was no doubt who the someone she was referring to was. I hugged her and looked at them all. "She's my choice." I sighed. "And we are not getting married because of the child." "Not really. She told me she wouldn't ask for support. We'll get married because even if she wasn't pregnant, I'd beg her to marry me. Don't get me wrong, I'm very happy we're having a baby, but that's not why we're getting married." I felt Tammy pressed against me. I looked down at her, and she smiled brilliantly. I woke up. "We're going to the courthouse next week. We talked, and Tammy doesn't want a big wedding. We're just doing the courthouse thing." The white dress and flowers didn't help at all last time. Tammy shrugged and stood up. I took her hand. "I think we've said everything that needs to be said, so we'll leave." Even as we walked out, I felt like Mom had turned her anger onto Cynthia. In the car, Tammy stared out the window for a moment. Cynthia was the head cheerleader, right? First her, then 2 years later Sylvia. I don't remember Sylvia much, but Cynthia could be a stone bitch. She rolled her eyes. Probably, and still may be. I shook my head. I've never seen her like this. I was stunned that she acted like that in front of her mother. She suddenly smiled. Did you really say that you would marry me even if I wasn't pregnant? I didn't know you were pregnant when I went looking for you. Exactly. You didn't know, right? You're crazy. You know that. Maybe. Either way, I had to see you again. She actually giggled and suddenly covered her mouth. God, that was girly. You're a girl. I checked, several times, to be honest. I reached out my hand and slowly ran it along her thigh. We should probably double-check. She giggled again. Stop it. Damn it, it's probably those damn hormones that are making me act this way. Maybe. She took out bright red lipstick from her purse and began to apply it. When we get home, I'm going to mark my territory. You can make sure I'm a girl again. I received many apologetic messages from Sylvia and a rather subdued message of acceptance from my mother. All Cynthia sent was a series of messages to make sure I had a strong marriage. I hated the idea of a prenuptial agreement. I was sure that we would never part of our own free will, and I did not want to start the marriage with a show of distrust. Despite all this, we still had one specific marriage contract. I was supposed to take Tammy to meet the owners of the law firm. She was tense as we took the elevator to the top floor of the office. She put her light blue maternity dress back on. Mr. Brady's secretary, Serena, a rather buxom brunette with a penchant for very low-cut necklines, told us to go inside. Mr. Handley and Mr. Brady of Handley and Brady wanted to talk to her about a prenuptial agreement required before proposing a partnership. I told her what it was about in great detail. The only thing that was protected by the contract was my share in the firm when I became a junior partner and then a senior partner. It was more to protect the employees than me. I made sure the prenup didn't exclude her from anything else. To their surprise, she simply handed me the contract and asked if it said what they claimed. When I looked and said that it was, she simply signed it and returned it to them. Mr. Handley leaned forward. You may want to consult your own lawyer. That would probably be wise. She shook her head. It would be a waste of time and money. I will never leave him, and if he tries to leave me, I will be in jail for murder. I swear Mr. Brady smiled a little at that. He nodded. It's just a precaution, you know. She straightened her shoulders. You're not idiots. That's why you tested me. You probably don't think much of me, and I understand that. I did something stupid. That's okay. I'm not mad about it. If I had 100 people to talk about, I would have to take care. I would also do everything to protect them. We did test you, but you should know that we require this of all partners, either before or after marriage. When we got out, Tammy sat silently in the car until we got home, and then she turned and looked at me with tears in her eyes. I caught you watching, bastard. I raised my hand. What? That secretary with those big breasts. Any guy would look at those breasts. Hell, even I looked. That girl has some serious breasts. She wrinkled her nose. I think they're even real, not store-bought. But I was looking at the mirror panels on the wall, hoping to catch you so I could laugh about it later, and instead you smiled and looked at my ass like you were going to bite it off. Okay, you got me. I love your ass. It's the cutest ass on the planet. You see my ass every day, mostly naked. And what? She shook her head, then practically ran from the car to our front door. I caught up with her just as she opened the door. We barely had time to enter the apartment when she attacked me. Her dress simply disappeared, and there was nothing underneath. Within 30 seconds, we were making the most passionate love. She said she loves me. Even though the wedding was on the horizon, we just never said it to each other. She turned away, still covering her mouth, and I noticed how tears began to form in her eyes. I raised my hand and turned her face towards me. I didn't say it was a bad way to say it, just a weird one. I love you too. She removed her hands from her face and placed them on my shoulders. A few tears fell from her face onto mine. This should work. If it doesn't work, I'll just die. It'll work. It's not all chemistry and amazing sex. You're right for me. She giggled again. But the sex is amazing too, isn't it? As Tammy's due date approached, she became increasingly intrusive and somehow more lustful. She walked around completely naked all day. Sex helped her calm her nerves and get rid of headaches. Does your back hurt from carrying all that, baby? Back massage, then sex. Are your feet sore and swollen? Foot rubbing and sex. Dinner was late. Again. Overall, Tammy was a better fit than I could have ever hoped for. Mom hosted a more or less informal barbecue at home, grilled salmon and vegetables, music, and more people than I expected. Cynthia's husband, Randall, and Sylvia's husband, John, manned the grills while I kept the plates moving and kept the refrigerators stocked. Tammy tried to stay out of sight, but Sylvia came over, grabbed her, and dragged her to meet the people. At first, I was a little concerned that mixing Tammy and the country club might not work. I had lost sight of her and was beginning to wonder if I should go check on her when one of my mother's friends, Marie Wilson, came up to me, laughing quietly. "You caught yourself alive, young man." "Is she all right?" "I think she's having a great time." Angela Buford talked about making relationships work. Hasn't Angela been married 5 times? 6. She asked Tammy what she thought. Tammy looked her straight in the eye and said, "I don't know. Our relationship is completely based on hot sex. You know, we beat each other into the mattress every chance we get." I was laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. Angela started giggling and still hasn't stopped. Of course, the inevitable happened late one evening. After Tammy had had some wild sex, she suddenly slid off of me and stood up with her eyes wide open. "Cam, the baby will appear." She stopped and sighed quietly. "Help me take a shower because she's coming very soon." By the time we finished washing up, getting dressed and heading out, her contractions were only a couple of minutes apart. The actual birth was much easier than we expected, with our Riley coming into the world in less than 3 hours. Tammy made it look easy. The look on Tammy's face when she saw her little girl was one of absolute joy. Riley was the sweetest baby ever, certainly. Unlike most of the women I saw in labor and delivery, Tammy didn't look exhausted or exhausted, she was just glowing. I spoon-fed her while she fed Riley. It wasn't difficult at all. She smiled a soft smile that I had never seen as she studied Riley. "We'll have a few more of these." The nurse practically had to snatch Riley away from Tammy to hand her to me, so I could take her to the nursery so Tammy could be seen by the doctor again. When I returned from dropping Riley off at the nursery, Tammy was staring at the doctor. "6 weeks? You've got to be kidding me." He raised his hand reassuringly. "Your husband will just have to be patient." "It's not him I'm worried about. I'll be crawling on walls in 6 damn days. I can't stay away from this man for 12 hours. There's no way in hell I can go 6 weeks without sex." I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Everything will be okay, babe. We have a shower with 16 settings." "Maybe." She frowned, but wasn't thrilled, and then looked back at the doctor. I saw one of the nurses behind him run out of the room and into the hallway, desperately trying not to laugh. The nurse pushed Sylvia away, who stood there in shock with her mouth open. Tammy gave her a friendly wave. 5 days after the baby was born, a certified letter from the testing laboratory confirmed that Riley was indeed mine. I never thought much about it after dinner at the country club, but Tammy wanted me to know for sure. She also sent certified results to her mother, Cynthia and Sylvia. Having a baby changed our lives a lot, but adapting wasn't as difficult as I expected. It seemed like Tammy had been waiting her whole life to become a mother. Said it wasn't that hard. Just think about what her own mother was like, and then do the opposite. Plus, she was just good at it. She had a talent for it. She even took a nap with Riley so she wouldn't be as tired as most new moms. I did everything I could to help when I wasn't working. One of the benefits was that my mom even warmed up to Tammy because of the new baby. Mom quietly told me that it took Cynthia and her husband, Randall, forever to adjust to their baby. She was seriously impressed by Tammy's easy transition to motherhood. It was exactly 6 weeks before Tammy let her mom babysit for Riley for a few hours so she can take care of business, which was code for picking me up from the office, dragging me past a laughing Serena into the nearest hotel, and trying to sex me to death. Mom was not deceived for a minute. When Tammy came back for Riley, her mom winked at her and said she looked very relaxed. She also offered to babysit Riley when needed. Over the next year, Tammy and my mom really became close. I noticed this, but didn't say anything until my mom decided to explain. At first, I thought you were crazy. I expected you to marry someone with more. This sounds really terrible, but I thought you would marry someone with more class. She raised her hand to stop my reaction. I was wrong. Some people are meant for something special. Artists, athletes, singers. Tammy, too. It may sound old-fashioned, but this girl is truly meant to be a wife and mother. She puts everything she has into it, and I think she's perfect. I was amazed. Is it true? I'm not blind. At first, I thought it was all about white-hot sex. She saw me blush and shook her head. Even if I hadn't heard the story, only an idiot would have missed the way you two look at each other all the time. But it was much more than that. Sex is just a way to express your connection. She loves you, she loves Riley, and I will be shocked if you don't have at least 3 more children. I smiled. We talked about it. I think I talked her into 6 kids. Mom laughed quietly. I can live with that. In the meantime, enjoy some white-hot sex. This girl must be an absolute beast in bed. Her eyes sparkled with merriment. Sylvia was also warmer to Tammy. Her little girl was only 7 months older than Riley, so they managed to get closer against this background and even planned joint meetings, taking turns visiting each other. They apparently talked a lot about different things. One day at a barbecue, John came up to me and gave me a big hug. "What is this for?" He grinned. "You have the perfect wife." Then he walked away laughing. Cynthia was still cold towards Tammy and probably hated her even more after her mom accepted her. But she remained silent and participated in the visits, probably to keep an eye on Tammy. Life was pretty good, until Bobby Lee Creature got out of prison. An administrative error, they later said. Errors in papers. He was released with a batch of low-level, non-violent drug offenders. Bobby Lee didn't fit that description, but paperwork was paperwork, and he walked out the front gate, turned left, and disappeared. Of course, no one thought to warn us when they finally discovered the bug a week later, despite the law requiring victims to be warned in such cases. Bobby Lee Creature needed money to get to Mexico, and he headed straight to the only person he thought could give it. My first warning was from a police detective who told me that my mother was in the hospital and my wife and older sister had been kidnapped from Cynthia's home by Bobby Lee Creature. Sylvia was in the playroom with the children when he burst in. She heard a noise, looked up for a moment, then barricaded herself and all 3 children in the room and called 911 on her cell phone. She heard him say something about heading to the cabin, and the police were looking for an old hunting cabin somewhere west of town that had once belonged to his family. Mom was hit hard when she tried to stop him. Bobby Lee was a very big, very strong man. Prison made him even bigger, stronger, and more brutal. As soon as I hung up the phone, I received a call from a seriously pissed-off Randall, yelling at me for bringing that poor bitch into our world where she never belonged. He planned to download video of the doorbell from his home's security cameras and send it to the police in the hopes that it could be used to arrest Tammy. He hung up. I rushed out of the office, not knowing where to go or what to do, but before I got to the parking lot, I received a message from Sylvia that all the children were with her. Her husband John was already on his way home, and her mother was under observation, but it seemed with her everything will be okay. Going to the hospital seemed like the best option since I had no idea where Creature's hunting cabin was, and I didn't think the police would tell me anything. Halfway to the hospital, my phone started pinging with a security alarm. I almost ignored him, but decided to look just in case it was my house. It wasn't him. Someone turned off the alarm at our family lake house. No one had been there much since Dad died, and it was strange. Randall, John, my sisters, and I were the only ones who knew the code. I stopped and connected to the video feed from the security cameras. We only had two cameras on this cabin, one for the front door and one covering the main room, but whoever disabled the alarm left the cameras on purpose. Bobby Lee Creature was in the main room with two very frightened women. He held Tammy tightly by the hair. I sent a message to Randall, John, and Sylvia, telling them what was happening and to call the police. Tammy and I hardly ever discussed this house. We've certainly never been there together. I realized that I was only a few minutes from the house. Maybe I could do something before the police arrived. While I was driving along the country roads, I managed to put on my Bluetooth earphone and turned on the audio from the video stream. Bobby Lee, have you opened the safe yet? Cynthia, there's no more money here, Bobby. Bobby Lee, what about guns? Are they still here? Cynthia, no, one of the guys must have taken them after Dad died. Bobby Lee, what else is there? Something I can sell for money. Cynthia, there's a Remington sculpture and some paintings here. They're worth a lot. Bobby Lee, I can't do anything about this shit. Find something I can take away and sell. I stopped the car near a grove of trees near the turnoff to the driveway and began to creep up to the house. Bobby Lee, take off your clothes, bitch. You, me, and my little zing will have a party. Tammy, what? Cynthia? Bobby Lee, damn, Sin and I have known each other for a long time. She's wild. I used to call her Original Zing. Crazy bitch loves hard sex. Cynthia, Bobby Lee, damn, does Randall still believe your baby is his? Cynthia, shut up, Bobby. I got to the porch and started looking for some kind of weapon. Any. Bobby Lee, I told you to take off your damn clothes. Sin, come here and take off your clothes too. You probably haven't had sex since I went to prison. You'll love this, Tammy. Tammy, please, Bobby, just... The box with firewood was empty. Bobby Lee, damn bitch. I said, oh God, just look at this. Tammy Faye has finally grown breasts. Not as big as Sin's, but at least not completely flat. Tammy, please. Bobby Lee, you must have had a baby, right? She grew such breasts. Tammy, I have a little girl. Look, it's just... Bobby Lee, shut up, bitch. On my knees, I haven't had good fun in a long time. Sin, what are you going to do, Bobby? Bobby Lee, collect money and go to Mexico, then to South America. Sin, I mean us. Bobby Lee, I haven't decided yet. That damn bitch sent me to jail, so we have a lot to talk about. Now, Sin, take off your clothes and show me your big breasts. Tammy, at least let her go. Please, Bobby. Bobby Lee, tell you what, if you give me good sex, I might let you both go. He was lying. I could feel it. He had no intention of leaving them alive. I finally found what I was looking for. My hand grabbed the handle behind the box of firewood. The head of the cleaver broke, but we left the handle to turn firewood in the warm season in case of snakes. Some sound, reminiscent of a cry of rage and agony, escaped from the house as soon as I reached the door. You damn bitch, you damn. Let go. Damn bitch, I'll kill you. I entered the lock code and pushed the door. Tammy was curled up on the floor as Bobby Lee awkwardly kicked her over and over again. Half-naked Cynthia tried to stop him by grabbing his leg. He took a step back and turned a little, trying to shake Cynthia off. I punched as hard as I could, hitting him in the side of the head at the perfect angle. It sounded like a home run. Bobby Lee collapsed, his legs jerked several times, then he froze. His eyes were open and staring at the ceiling, seeing nothing. I sat down next to Tammy. She tried to speak, but could not make sounds. One pupil was greatly dilated, the other was pinpoint. Her left ear hung at an odd angle. I heard the sirens, but I still took out my phone and dialed 911. Cynthia looked at me with a mixture of shock, horror, and confusion. The 911 operator calmly took my information and said that the sirens I was hearing were for us, and that she had several ambulances on the way. Holding Tammy in my arms, I looked at Cynthia. "Put on your damn shirt." I was still sitting in the waiting room when John came in. He sat down next to me. "Sylvia didn't want you to wait here alone. Any news?" "Not yet." I shook my head. "They said the operation could last all night. The worst thing is a brain hemorrhage. She can handle it, Cam. This girl is one of the strongest I know." I was trying to think of something else to talk about. "Have you heard anything from Randall?" I got a short note from him apologizing for what he said about Tammy, but that was it. They will definitely get divorced. He will file for divorce tomorrow morning and get a DNA test. He leaned forward. "We both watched the security footage after you sent the message. Cynthia, there's no turning back after what he heard." "Yes, that's what I thought. Even if Timothy turns out to be Randall's child, she will still leave." Sylvia talked to her. "Cynthia isn't sure who the father is. It sounds like he might not be Bobby or Randall. She and Bobby were having a lot of parties at the time. Sylvia swears she didn't know anything, and I told her I believe. The only reason I let Sylvia talk to Cynthia is because I saw Cynthia try to stop him from beating Tammy to death." He winced. "What a mess. It's hard to believe." I nodded. Everything was simple, really. Bobby Lee needed money, so he went straight to Cynthia, hoping she could get him some cash. He had no idea Tammy would be there, but accepted it as a gift from God so he could get his revenge. Realizing that there was someone else in the house and expecting them to call the police, he ran to the logical place, the fishing lodge that Cynthia often used for her perverted second life. She had given him cash from the safe there several times, so he assumed the money was still there. I was brought out of my thoughts by John's snorting sound. What an idiot he was. What? He was married to Tammy for 3 years, so he must have known what kind of character she was. I couldn't help but snort, letting out a laugh. He was an idiot, you're right. He was a real monster. We both looked at Cynthia. She sat down opposite us, pale as a ghost, with dark circles under her eyes. We met at school, and something about him. He brought out the worst in me. He could make me do anything." She sobbed. "I don't have any excuses. I'm not going to fight Randall over anything. I just hope Mom will let me and Timothy stay at her place." John nodded without looking at her. "Where do you live now?" "In the house. Randall has gone to his sister's until I can get my mom and me to get my cheating ass out of the house. He's going to do a DNA test on Timothy. I don't know how that's going to go." She fell silent. "When Bobby Lee was arrested and sent to prison, I was free. It felt like I was out of some kind of hell. I swore I would never do anything like that again." She looked at us with despair. "I tried to be the perfect wife. I tried to forget that I ever did anything like that." John nodded grimly. "Why did you leave the security camera on?" Her mouth trembled for a moment. "I was sure he would kill us. I thought it would be some kind of revenge from beyond the grave if there was proof." I just looked at the floor. "Where?" I looked at her. "I'm sorry. For everything. For all of it. For the way I treated Tammy. I was afraid that she would find out or discover something. Or, I don't know, something." She rubbed her face. "When we realized he was going to kill us, she begged him to let me go. And when she did what she did, she tried to push me towards the door with one hand, trying to make me run. She knew what he was going to do and tried to save me. I'm so sorry." "You have to admit your mistakes, but you didn't bring Bobby here, so it's not your fault. And you fought tooth and nail to stop him from killing Tammy. When Tammy wakes up, I'll definitely tell her about it." Tammy's eye, not covered in bandages, opened. "Do you always go to bed with patients here?" Her voice was a hoarse whisper. "Only if they're cute enough." I didn't expect this, I didn't expect to wake up at all. I ran my finger over her hand. You won't get rid of me that easily. Is Riley okay? And Mom? She blinked several times. Riley is okay. All the kids are okay. Mom will be okay too. What about Cynthia? She's fine. She tried to stop Bobby. I remember some of that, how she grabbed his leg and everything. She didn't know what to do when he showed up and... She stopped, not sure I knew. I think she knew him before they dated. We heard everything. John, Randall, and I were on the CCTV at the cabin. Randall heard everything Bobby said. He's going to divorce Cynthia. Yes, that's probably what will happen. Her eyes opened sharply. Cameras? CCTV system on the front door and in the main room. Her eyes widened. Oh God, did you see how I saw you defend yourself, save Cynthia, and deal with Bobby Lee the best you could. Anyway, I was. I looked into her eyes. No, you can't turn it on yourself. You didn't do anything wrong. At all. If Bobby Lee had lived, he would have been charged for that too. Is he really dead? I nodded. You were really there. I wasn't sure. I thought I saw you and tried to talk to you, but I couldn't say a word. I know. I felt sick just thinking about how close I was to losing her. I covered myself by kissing her tenderly on the corner of her lips, one of the few places on her head not covered in bandages. I tried to tell you how much I love you and Riley, but I couldn't tell. I love you too, and Riley too. She sobbed and a tear rolled down her face. What do I look like? Right now, you basically look like a ball of bandages. A cute ball of bandages. I plan to bring Riley when enough of your bandages are removed for her to know who you are. I feel very strange, like my head is a balloon. They had to shave my head, right? I had to. She giggled quietly again. Now the carpet matches the curtains. I'm going to grow my hair back to its natural state and see how I like it. What is your hair color? I don't know. I've been bleaching them since I was 10. I guess we'll have to find out together. She giggled again, and I kissed her. A few days later, we were visited in the hospital by a serious police detective. Tammy, this is Detective Naomi Washington. She needs to take your statement. Tammy frowned, then shrugged. I'm not getting arrested, right? Detective Washington looked at her, puzzled. No? Why do you think so? There's a couple of cops stopping by every half hour, so I'm just wondering. An unexpected laugh escaped the detective. No, they just want to get a good look at you so that if they stop your car, they know to let you go. Tammy's mouth curved into a smile. Seriously? They are both shocked and impressed. Somehow a photo of the body escaped the prosecutor's office. This must not be very pleasant. That's very dramatic. Tammy looked down at her feet. It's his own fault. Detective Washington looked at me, a little concerned. You protected yourself and the other woman. You did what you had to do. Don't feel guilty. Washington looked at us in disbelief. I was going to recommend counseling, but after this, I'm starting to think I'll need it more than you two. Tammy looked at her. I already told the hospital that I would talk to the consultant. I decided that it was worth it, just in case. She grabbed my hand. But I have his support, and I have his trust, and that's all I need. Detective Washington took her statement. Riley got her mom back, not that she ever doubted it, and, as cliché as it may sound, we had each other. Despite the incredibly long odds, Randall turned out to be Timothy's father. They entered into a joint custody agreement, with Cynthia being the primary caregiver due to Randall's job. Randall did not argue about paying child support and even paid more. Cynthia made it clear that she did not expect any content and allowed him to dictate the schedule. Because she was able to move into her mother's home and had access to the support of a family trust, she did not experience financial difficulties. But she suffered. She made no excuses and publicly admitted her mistake far more than I would have ever expected. The country club community turned its back on her, even though many of them were just as guilty. Unlike all of Cynthia's old friends, Tammy never rejected her, even though Cynthia was one of the women Bobby Lee dated when they were married. She looked after Timothy while Cynthia went to therapy and even went to one session with her while I was babysitting my mother's children. Cynthia almost couldn't stop crying when they got back to her mom's house and Tammy had to help her in and sit on the couch. Cynthia just held on to her until she could stop crying. When I asked Tammy about this later, she fell silent for a long moment. She apologized to me for being with Bobby Lee and for treating me like crap all this time because she was afraid that I would find out something. She took a deep breath and asked me to keep an eye on her. Why? She's afraid. If she ever loves someone again, what if another Bobby Lee comes along? She couldn't resist him, couldn't leave. I think she's going to avoid men altogether. She's afraid to take risks. Her therapist says that she is a sexaholic with self-destructive tendencies. The therapist says that I can support her. I nodded, impressed with Tammy's decision. She's going to need help. She'll need it. Tammy flinched, suddenly looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. And I'll help her because I can understand. Think about it, Cam. What if we or I had been married that day in the park? Would it have mattered? You felt it, just like I did. I pray, and you know that I don't pray, but I pray that it will matter, that we can stand. I know in my heart that we are right for each other, and Bobby Lee and Cynthia were wrong for each other. She grabbed my wrists. But Jesus, what if? I didn't have an answer to this. All we could do was appreciate how things worked out right for us. Cynthia never married. She never allowed herself to enter into any long-term relationships. I'm not sure Randall and Cynthia will ever be friends, but they are trying to co-parent their son, and I've never seen them argue. She dedicated herself to being the best mother she could be, and, as it turned out, an amazingly devoted aunt to our 6 children along with Sylvia and John's 3 children. We sold the apartment and bought a very large house for obvious reasons. Mom is delighted that her house is full of 10 grandchildren. She built a swimming pool and 2 tree houses. When the grandkids are at Mom's, Tammy and I are usually at the cabin, where Tammy usually walks around wearing nothing but cherry red lipstick, wedding rings, and a hungry smile. It turned out that her natural hair color is strawberry blonde. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.